Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andre Porter. I'm the Policy Director for Science is Us, and we are excited to kick off our fourth session in the STEM Workforce Development series in Maine, looking at the future of STEM jobs and innovation in Maine. As a few points of housekeeping, we want to go over just some basic controls. This meeting is being recorded and it'll be posted in the next couple of days for those of you who want to view it or share it broadly. We asked everybody to mute their lines. You should be in listen-only mode, but if you're not, please mute yourself. If you have a question, we'd like you to use the raise hand function, but also our panel will include a Q&A portion that if you want to feed questions to our panelists, we'd like you to input them into the chat box or the Q&A box. If you lose connection, please close your window and try to reconnect, or send an email to one of our organizers and we'll try to help you troubleshoot. Again, if you have any questions, please click the chat box and we will get to as many as we can. And I will turn it over to our colleagues at the Chamber.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Connors. I'm the president of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of our education workforce here at the Chamber, our education workforce, that is very appropriate to say that, but it happens to be our Education Foundation. And also on behalf of our great partner, Science is Us, we do want to welcome you to this, as Andre said, is a fourth and final in a series that looks at STEM and its importance in our state. I want to stop for a moment because I want to give a shout out to Science is Us. They have been an extremely wonderful partner who have put together, as you will see in a moment, not only this panel, but previous panels and all three sessions that have really helped us better understand the significance, the value, and the opportunities that go with STEM workforce. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what has occurred in the previous three webinars that have been held dealing with workforce. We have looked at it in terms of the opportunities that exist, how to increase the presence of it. We've looked at it in terms of how we find STEM today in non-traditional jobs, how it's broader than it used to be, how it's no longer the image of the old. And the third series looked at STEM as it related to the COVID-19 challenge, with a particular emphasis on the biomedical sector. And today, as Andre said, it's the future of STEM and innovation here in Maine. I'll say this on behalf of the Chamber, we see STEM in a very positive way for the future. Principally, among other reasons, is because our governor and her administration has created a strategic plan for the state of Maine that the business community has bought into. And it's one that places, I think, STEM right in the middle of that. And here's why. There are three pillars that build upon the strength of the strategic plan. One has to do with talent and workforce. How do you recruit people? How do you retain people? How do you provide them with the skills that they need for this economy? The second is innovation. Every business that exists today that were here 50 years ago or 25 years ago knows what innovation means. And the third one is those investments in infrastructure such as broadband, transportation, research and development. So I think you will agree with me that workforce here in Maine is very strong and creates incredible opportunities for us. But that's our opinion. We have a panel today that clearly are outstanding, and we're all anxious to hear what they have to say about the future of STEM and innovation, both in terms of their perspective, their opinions, their predictions, but also the challenges and the opportunities it presents for us. So I'm going to hand it over to the president of the Chamber's Education Foundation, who happens to be also our attorney. But before I do that, again, I want to acknowledge Science is Us, who have teamed with us for this incredible four-part series. I also want to recognize a number of companies that have been with us throughout the entire webinar COVID-19 period of time. Webinars have become a means to the end, and we're very pleased that our business community have supported it. They are Bangor Savings Bank, Central Maine Power, MEMIC, Rudman Winchell, counselors at law, as well as Eaton Peabody, attorneys at law, Delta Dental, and AmeriHealth Caritas. We thank all of them, and Ben, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dana. I'd just like to briefly introduce the exceptional panel that we have lined up today. We're really excited to have this panel discussion today. It's going to be moderated by Kate Foy with the Department of Economic and Community Development here in the state of Maine. We have Sasha Daria, the CEO of Blueshift Aerospace, Austin Williams, the Director of Partnership Development at the Ruth Institute in Northeastern, Dr. Clare Nelson, who's a futurist, sustainability engineer, social entrepreneur, storyteller. And we have Ruth Kermish, the Executive Director of the Maine Mathematics Science and Alliance. I'd like to just give a little background on each of our speakers. They all have exceptional careers. So I'm just going to touch on a few things and then hand it over to our moderator, Kate. Sasha Daria is the CEO of Blueshift Aerospace, which is preparing to conduct the first ever commercial launch of a rocket powered by bio-derived fuel anywhere in the world, using a proprietary modular hybrid rocket engine that is also unique to aerospace industry. Austin Williams is the Director of Partnership Development at the Ruth Institute. Austin has spent over a decade building and leading business development efforts across a range of professional settings, including startup, corporate, municipal, and now academic. He recently served the city of Boston as the mayor's economic development cabinet. Dr. Clare Nelson has been actively engaged in business international development for more than 25 years. She works in the area of project development, management, with a particular focus on private sector development. A Renaissance woman, she is a development engineer, social entrepreneur, and futurist. The first Jamaican woman to earn a doctorate degree in engineering discipline and only Black person in her graduating class. Dr. Nelson holds industrial engineering degrees from the State University of New York at Buffalo, Purdue University, and a doctorate in engineering and management from George Washington University. Dr. Ruth Kermish joined the Maine Mathematics Science Alliance as Executive Director in November 2014. She has extensive experience in STEM education research, project development, implementation, evaluation. She has served as the principal investigator for a variety of NSF, EPA, and USDA funded projects, which developed innovative place-based STEM education experiences for K-12 focused on serving rural communities, totaling more than $9 million in funding, supporting Maine's educators and students. That is quite an impressive panel. We would like to thank you all for joining us, and moderating it is Kate Foy. Kate handles legislative affairs and communications for the Department of Economic and Community Development. Prior to joining the administration in January of 2019, she worked on a number of political campaigns, which includes serving as Senator Angus King's field director for a re-election campaign in 2018. Kate, I hand it off to you, and thank you for moderating this panel today. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you, Ben, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Before we get started, I just wanted to share a few comments about workforce. Over the last 11 months, the Department of Economic and Community Development has really been focused on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As we start to look now towards economic recovery, getting back to the strategic plan and looking at the recommendations from the Governor's Economic Recovery Committee, workforce development is a very important topic, especially as we think about jobs and development in STEM careers. Workforce development is really a continuum. It's not up to us to decide what path people should take. It's our job to make sure that all paths are open and inclusive to everyone. We need to make sure that students see science and technology as enabling, not just an end product. If you can't see it, you can't dream it, and you can't be it. STEM education and training is a critical piece of Maine's economic recovery. We need to be able to connect people with new types of jobs. We need to build a workforce that is adaptable and a workforce that allows for people to be lifelong learners. Our workforce needs to be ready for the global 21st century economy, and STEM education and training is going to be what helps us get there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sasha. So thank you for being here and welcome, and the floor is yours.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Usually I get this wrong when it comes to Zoom. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Just want to make sure I got that right. It's all too often where I go wrong. Well, thank you very much. Let me just change this around. Thank you very much. And can everybody see my screen okay as well too? I just want to validate. Yes.
Yep,
okay.
You're good.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for the time, for this opportunity to speak. I'm Sasha Daria, CEO of Blueshift Aerospace. I'm an example of, I hope, one of many currently and one of many more in the future of the way we hope the workforce will shift here in Maine. I was raised in Maine. I went to college in the Midwest to get a physics degree. My first attempt to Maine was successful. I came back, got another degree in electrical engineering at the University of Southern Maine. And despite best efforts, could not find the job that thrilled me or interested me here in Maine. And I immediately was employed off into Massachusetts and then beyond. So I think, a lot's changed, of course, since I graduated the second time. And I'm hoping that Blueshift will serve as a clear marker in time when Maine chooses to enter into the new space industry and starts becoming a hub for aerospace jobs, starting in the very near future and well into the future. So Ben had mentioned that what we were, it's a few weeks out of date, but we successfully launched the Stardust 1.0 launch vehicle. Was our prototype vehicle demonstrating our proprietary bio-derived fuel, our Marvel engine. We were the very first company in the world to commercially launch a rocket powered by a bio-derived fuel with paying commercial payloads. We're also the very first company in Maine to launch a commercial rocket. So we're very proud of that. I'm hoping I have enough time. I'm just going to share with this, and I have no idea how this is going to come through, but here's a little quick video from the BBC who covered the event.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence started. This is awesome. I'm so excited. This is fantastic. There are medium-sized companies and rockets that are launching, I would call them buses to space with medium-sized payloads, but we want to be the Uber to space.
So, what you saw there was my inner child coming out from when I grew up in Bucksport in Orland, Maine. And the view behind me, you can see here, is actually not far from where I lived. It's a star shot of the sky of where I lived in Maine, which I think in Maine inherently grows an interest in space because of our clear skies, our beautiful skies at night. And I think there's many rocket scientists and I apologize. Rocket scientists and engineers and scientists in our today and into our future. So what are we doing here at Blueshift? A real quick overview. We're trying to tackle the fundamental problems with rockets. They're complex, they're expensive, they're dangerous. We found that tiny satellites are trying to go to space, they're called CubeSats. They fundamentally have to ride hobo on large launch vehicles going to space, freight trains. They lack control of when they get to launch, where they get to launch. There's lots of extra expenses because they're often going on rockets that are rated for man-rated missions. So we learned that there was also a niche market made up of students and professional researchers who would not only be delighted to have a dedicated launch vehicle, an Uber to say, to carry their payload to space, but they would actually pay more for it. They'd pay up to 25% more. And that's what we're gonna do. We also found out that launching from Maine would give us an advantage that not only could be found only at military bases in California and from Alaska. Being able to put these tiny satellites up into orbit, into what's called a polar orbit, where you should shoot due south towards the southern pole that loops around. Only Maine can do that, only on the eastern seaboard. An incredible opportunity for us. This is a quick overview of what will be our first fully commercial launch vehicle called Starless Rogue. what we saw launch on the 31st was Stardust 1.0. This will ultimately carry about 30 kilograms of payload. This will be scientific payload, research payload, up to space, where the customer's payloads will experience 0 Gs for up to 6 or 8 minutes at a time. We will actually provide more 0 G time, more time to do science in space than any of our competition, including Blue Origin, there's a company called Up Aerospace, and others. Then our next plan is to move into really strategically where Maine has the biggest opportunity to compete with the whole United States, but potentially globally, and that's to launch tiny satellites into orbit, into polar orbit. Again, we'll be launching 30 kilograms of payloads into polar orbit, and we will basically be able to launch these into low Earth orbit, and we will reduce the wait times. Right now, if you want to launch a small satellite, you have to wait 1, 2, or 3 years, and so much research that has to be done is done by students, and they all too often have to graduate before they even get to see their research launched. We want to reduce that time from develop an idea, make your idea, manufacture that satellite, to launch to as low as within a year. And we also think we can do it by reducing their cost to get there. This is a bit about our technology, which we developed under grants from Maine Technology Institute and from NASA. And that's actually that was a key that I want to point out, is that Maine has some unique attributes that are organizations that we don't have elsewhere. For instance, we have the Maine Technology Institute. We have Tech Place here at Brunswick Landing, the Loring Commerce Center, great resources for entrepreneurs, students alike, interns, as we've now had several, to learn about new tech and then be involved in inventing their own companies. It was MTI and Brunswick Landing, Tech Place, that drew me from Massachusetts to move this company Blueshift here. The only others, I was told in Massachusetts, if I wanted to do an aerospace company, Massachusetts was not the place for you. Literally told this by a number of folks. Go to Florida, go to Texas, go to California. And then somebody had the foresight to tell me, you know what, look at Maine. They're trying to attract industries just like yours. And they were right. That pulled us here. So this just talks a bit about, if you don't understand what polar orbits are, check out some of check out online our YouTube channel, and we go into a bit more explanation. But it's a really unique opportunity. We ultimately hope to be able to launch from off the coast of Maine. We launched just at the end of January from Limestone, Maine, another incredible location that has so much possibility and opportunity for developing new companies. So our team, right now, we're about 6 or 8 individuals, and we're just about now to go into a round of private investment. So, but what I really want to get into is what our future holds for us in terms of who we plan to hire. Down the road, we are hoping to, within 5 years, buffer our staff up to 40 to 50 people to fully be able to tackle both the suborbital and orbital launch market. And these range in all types of jobs and positions. And I think, frankly, any of these are exciting, especially if you're doing it in aerospace, especially if it's about launching rockets in Maine. Everything from engineers, like aerospace engineers, to manufacturing staff, the basics of bookkeepers, avionics engineers. We're going to need RF engineers. We're going to need people to help us do testing, both techs. We're going to need people to help us do the wiring. Avionics techs are going to be important. I understand the University of Maine of Augusta is about to start up a program in that area. We're going to need software developers. We're going to need folks with composite experience. And Maine already has a wonderful plethora of people who are inherently capable in the arena of composites. In fact, the gentleman who's been helping us to date has about over 30 years of experience in doing marine-based composites and also aerospace composites. We're going to need folks not only here at Brunswick Landing, but we're also going to need folks at the different locations for launching to space. So that's probably going to be in the Washington County area. We're going to need launch logistics staff people who can help ready our rockets, get them loaded up. We may be launching off a barge. We may be launching off of a peninsula. Help prepare our customer payloads and work with them to get their payloads integrated into our rocket just prior to launch. We'll need folks to help us actually, monitor our launches, the telemetry, the ground stations. There's a lot of exciting positions here. And, I know that our company will be just one of many. My hope is that with the new Maine Spaceport Complex, which is likely to come to fruition here in the next few years, yes, we may be one of just a few launch companies, but there will probably be dozens upon dozens of other companies developing new CubeSat technologies, developing new broadband communications technologies, Earth imaging technologies, software to process all that data that's coming down from Earth, new ground stations, and then on top of that, we fully expect that launching rockets from Maine is not only about the technical aspects of getting things to space, but Maine, because we are known as vacation land to the rest of the country, is actually a real advantage to us. We heard from our customers that we interviewed, we interviewed about 40, 50 customers over the last few years. And we found that when they heard there was a possibility to be able to go to a launch in Maine, they were flabbergasted and loved the idea because everybody loves Maine. So we think that the perfect recipe here is not only to do launch, but to do launch and blend it with Maine's inherent attribute as a beautiful place to visit. So we foresee lots of extra additional knock-on effects to the tourism industry as we launch off from the coast of Maine, whether it's hotels, restaurants, and there's even talks about doing special live performance events during and prior to launches that we would be glad to see come to fruition. So with that, I'm gonna end I imagine I might have talked too long, so I just want to give people a quick insight into what we're doing here in Maine today and what the possibility is for tomorrow.
Great, Sasha, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And a special shout out because I live in Brunswick, so it's very exciting. It's going on right in my backyard. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Austin Williams. And I don't know if Sasha, you need to, there we go. So Austin, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks Dana, the team, Kate, for the opportunity, and Sasha, I actually just want to say congratulations on the recent launch. I think it's awesome what Blueshift is building, and I've actually been on meetings these last few months while simultaneously reloading your YouTube live stream, and so I was really excited to see the launch. Awesome. I don't know, we'll have to find a way to work together. There's got to be something there.
I think there's got to be a way.
But I'm gonna refrain from slides. I'm really excited about this panel. I'm hoping it'll be a dynamic kind of conversation between colleagues up here, and I want to at least introduce myself. I'll say a few things and talk about the Ruth Institute, but I think starting with the quick story of actually how I came to the Ruth Institute, because that really ties into our mission and our vision moving forward. So before joining the team, by the way, I'm Austin Williams. I'm the Director of Partnership Development for the Institute, but before joining the team, as mentioned, I worked for the mayor's office in Boston. And so I was part of the economic development cabinet there. I had taken a role in 2018 with a newly established unit known as the business strategy team. And our mandate was straightforward. It was business attraction, engagement, and retention. And my specific purview within that was to apply that mindset really to the city and ultimately the region's biggest sectors, which was advanced technology and life sciences, and led me to constantly think about, okay, who are the players, where are the resources, what are the policies, what's working, what's missing, and how is that driving attraction and retention within advanced technology, within life sciences. Simultaneously, my wife, who works at Mass General in pediatric surgery, she and I were thinking about the classic, what's the 5-year plan? What's the 10-year plan? Do we like Boston? Is Boston getting too expensive? Or are people kind of mean in Boston? Do we want to go somewhere else? And we'd taken a lot of trips to Maine, had grown up going there, visiting, various parts, and we're spending a lot of time going to Portland in particular. And we would go and really, I was wearing two hats. One was, I think, the classic tourist hat, which is, oh, wow, like this place is great. The people are great. The food's great. The scene is great. The culture's great. The heritage is great. But simultaneously, I was wearing an economic development hat. And looking across, and as a student of city building, saying, I see here in Maine, I see here in Portland, some of these inherent, fundamental, primordial level ingredients that go on to launch a great city. And so I'm really curious, what are the catalysts going to be that come along and put Maine and put Portland on the main stage? So you fast forward to January 2020. I think it was like halfway through the workday. I see an announcement that Northeastern, who I knew intimately well through my role with the city, Northeastern University was launching a graduate and research campus that would be in Portland, Maine, that just so happened to be focused on advanced technology and life sciences, and just so happened to have a core mission of creating economic growth and dynamism. So I was sold. I wanted to get in touch. I wanted to be a part of it. And really from that point onwards, the rest is history. And so today I'm fortunate to serve as the Director of Partnership Development for the Institute. What that effectively means is I'm spending my days thinking about where we can apply our mission, our mindset, and our resources to make magic happen with others. That can be industry, that can be academic partners, those can be civic, governmental partners, community partners. The realm of collaboration can be workforce development related, it can be talent related, it can be research related, it can be entrepreneurship related. I'll talk a little bit about those programs. So that's my story, and that's what drew me to Maine, because I saw the potential already. And then to have the Ruth Institute arrive, to know Northeastern, to know what it's done so far, and to even have been a part of this new team for a little over 6 months, I'm excited about what it means for the future of Maine in driving that economic growth, and particularly, I think, relative to today's topic, expanding access to STEM. So let me end and kind of wrap up by just giving a snapshot of the Ruth Institute and where we are today. There's nearly 50 of us. So we've grown fast. We're effectively a high growth startup ourselves within a larger academic institution. When I joined, we launched last January. I joined in June. In July, we were accredited as an academic institution. We have an active, dynamic 50,000 square foot campus on the Portland waterfront. By this June, we will have over 200 enrolled learners in degree and certificate programs and another 300 corporate learners who have actually embarked on really tactical skill building pathways with us. These are in fields like data science, computer science, biotechnology, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. I think some of the fields that Sasha mentioned as well. And in the next few years, we're going to be increasing that enrollment and increasing that scope of educational impact to several thousand learners across both the individual and corporate spectrum. We've been very fortunate to have philanthropy and funding behind us. The first, of course, was with Dave and Barb Rue when the Institute was first stood up, and this past fall was through the Alphon Foundation. That has supercharged our operations, particularly through this philanthropy. Just a couple numbers to note, and relative to this conversation, we're going to be awarding over 60 million in scholarships that are going to provide pathways to individuals seeking education by way of the Rue Institute. Another 4 million of that philanthropy is going to drive job creation, direct job creation, specifically through Northeastern's Bedrock Co-op program. So we're going to be working with our partners in industry, whether those are startups, mid-size, or big companies, to place Maine-based undergraduate and graduate students in 6-month co-op roles. There's already a little over 30 students right now in the January cohort. We're going to be welcoming over 100 by July. Again, roles like bioinformatics, data science, data analysts, working with local companies, also based in Maine, so driving some additional economic impact there. And we have an entrepreneurship program that we're going to be launching and launching in the months ahead that will support early stage ventures that are in these spaces, so in advanced technology, in life sciences, as well as cross-pollinating with small business programs. So thinking about how we can take an entrepreneurship approach in the skills that we have and work with local resources that are already in place, that are already working with entrepreneurs and small businesses to make a broader effect and to really amplify our impact. We have stood up a research operation, which is going to hone in specifically on artificial intelligence, engineering, advanced life sciences and medicine, and data visualization. Specifically the interplay between those things. So I think where we are today and really STEM effectively, everything's in this, I saw this in my old role, but everything's in the same sandbox together. Technology and life sciences go hand in hand. The sequencing of the pandemic and the SARS-CoV-2 virus was done by way of machine learning and artificial intelligence. The vaccine was developed by way of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So these two are coinciding, and we're going to take a research approach which brings all those together. Finally, because it's near and dear to my heart and my role, we have over 40 partners now. We started with 10, and these are 40 partners across industry, across academic settings, across community categories. We're trying a bunch of different things. We're working on talent, we're working on research, we're piloting new programs, we're conceiving new programs, we're co-advocating for each other. We're thinking about how we can create magic together. So we're building the plane while it's in the air, building the rocket while it's in the air, I guess, to give a nod to Sasha. It's an exciting mission. And ultimately, I think for me and our team, we're going to measure ourselves by the opportunities that we create. So have we advanced lives, individuals' capabilities, and really people's sense of what's possible by way of education? Have we facilitated dynamic research, new ideas, and new outcomes? How many companies have we helped? How many companies have we launched? How many companies have we accelerated? How many companies have we attracted? And really on that last point, I think this is something that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about lately. We're in a digital and remote first world. A lot of companies are sunsetting their real estate spaces and looking at their talent pool as global or countrywide or certain region-wide. And so how are we and our partners going to create a hub and a center of gravity in Maine that is opening pathways for just highly ambitious individuals, particularly in the STEM space? So with that said, I want to wrap things up. I'm really excited for the conversation here today. I welcome anyone who wants to chat one-on-one and think, pie in the sky anytime. That's my forte. But again, I really appreciate the opportunity, Dana and team, and look forward to the conversation ahead.
Great, Austin, thank you so much. And in our 10-year strategic plan, we have a goal of attracting 75,000 new people to either Maine or our workforce. So I'd like to thank you for moving here and helping us get to that number. And we're excited to have you and the Rue Institute here in Maine. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Clare Nelson. The virtual floor is yours. You just need to go ahead and unmute yourself and get started.
Well, greetings and salutations. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you. I am so glad you're here because, as some of you know, I was the first Jamaican on the moon. I got there in 2030, and I have to say, Sasha, it's good to see you because back in, I think it was 2021 when we first met, we had no idea we'd be working together on the work I've done in pulling together the whole United Planetary Society to assure the rights to space movement. But your work was just so fascinating. When I met you the first time, I was like, wow, I've got to work with this guy. And we were so much in sync with the whole space sustainability thing, and we have gone on to do great things. And again, thank you also. I must say, good to see Austin here again from the Ruth Institute, because his support for some of the work I was trying to do with pushing out to ensure we had a just space movement, ensure that we're able to do what we did by getting people employed and trained. So I think I may have gone too far into the future, but let me come back to where we are today. So what is the future we're trying to get to? As I think about Maine, I recognize that you have a challenge in terms of you may have 86.7% of graduation rate in high school, but you don't seem to be having the same rate in terms of those who are making to tertiary. It's only 46%. So given that we're talking about STEM and science, I'm an engineer, and we know that that is in everything. It's in our food, energy, water, housing, healthcare, communications, which we thank God for communications, especially space. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to be talking to each other today. And of course, finance, because everything is run by science and engineering. Paper money, that's paper and textile and electronic engineering. So everything is engineering based on science. So the need for us to ensure that our populations are fully STEM literate goes without saying. The challenge sometimes is to have the funding to ensure that all schools have the opportunity, all people have an opportunity to choose, even if they end up being in the art side of the world and not so much as a hardcore engineer, even if they're going to be a policymaker, a lawyer, an artist, a filmmaker, the knowledge of some aspect of science and engineering and how it fits into their world is really critical. So the first thing I'd like to say, I really like to see if we can think about beyond the space industry of the future, we're talking about AI. This is Industry 4.0 world. People are talking about 3D printing of houses, 3D printing of CubeSats. I mean, people are doing so many things with AI, 3D printing. We now know that the quantum computing revolution is here. The US government has established that, a new framework for advancing in that area. Advanced manufacturing, and of course, the big one we cannot forget, cybersecurity. I was on a phone call earlier this morning, and we're talking about a 1.5 million people gap in cybersecurity staffing needs in the USA alone. So we're talking really about a huge need to have people who are trained and ready for the jobs of the future, the industries of the future. So these jobs are many. I'm just thinking about myself. I sometimes wish I could find somebody just to show me how to adequately use my phone. And I always get such a big kick about talking to my godchildren who are like, 10 and 11 and saying, hey, when I was going to school, and then I add this phrase, before the laptop was invented, Auntie Claire, you mean you weren't around? You were born before it was invented? Yeah, actually, I was born also before the phone that you're using was invented. It's like the people who are born into this digital world, the 4.1 billion people who are carrying a smartphone, and the people who are born after 1994, so I believe when the cell phone became common, and 84, I believe when the portable phone became a thing that we would carry. We've found that we're now moving in a totally different world. And so the policy people, the educational people, and of course the private sector has got to step up to the plate to have a social compact, if you will, that allows us to really move this thing forward. So I talk about social compact and the role of the private sector, because as I think about jobs of the future, after all, if the private sector is not supporting and actively supporting the integration of what it is they need to do to produce the good or the service that they do well, to the education sector, we find a continuing complaint that many employers say people come out of school and they're not prepared for the workplace. They go to 2 years of university or 4 years of university, they think they're hot shots, but really they can't do much other than regurgitate what it is they have learned. And so when we're talking about being a robotics engineer, being a robotic programmer, a data ethicist, data trust officer, and I have to say, nobody ever talks about this, but we also need sustainability engineers and sustainable technology audit people, because again, with the challenge that's facing us in this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world of Industry 4.0, with the challenges of climate change, with the challenges that we're living in right now, not knowing exactly how we're going to reorganize our life as we say goodbye and bury a future we might have thought we would have had, but now not knowing how these new viruses will erupt in the future, we have to wholly rethink how we design our homes, our offices, and our business risk systems to be able to continue as we have done in the last, almost 18 months now, almost 12 months now, right? Since February last year to February now. We've been living in a total, almost like a warp matrix. So these are some of the things that I think is very important for the private sector to really reimagine its role, not just as I'm here to make profit and this is all that there is, but how do we really create the social compact so we all move towards lives of well-being? And I think Maine as a particular state, and I have to do this, I'm sorry. The rain in Maine falls greatly on the plain. I've been singing that in my mind since I got this invitation. I know it's the rain in Spain, but I keep on hearing that tone. So back to normal. So as we think about Maine as a state, as you heard about tourism, it's beautiful. You have clear skies. You can do a different kind of tourism. I also think that Maine can be a leader in showing how we move from a state that in some ways has some good metrics, some metrics not so good. Your poverty rate, 10% poverty, 5.3% of people in extreme poverty. That means you're living at 50% below your poverty line. And then you have 10% of people in poverty. Granted, it's only 141,000 people, but it's high when you consider the number of people, people that you have, 1 million people or so. And then within that context, you see 30% of the people who are in poverty are African American, and then 10% are Hispanic. So, you're looking at really an inequality that's also based around traditional, let's say, boundaries of race and class and all those things. So I think Maine, because you only have 1.4 million people, actually has an opportunity to be a driver of change for the future of America we want. What is the future we are working towards? And I think that the private sector can really build on what Portland has been doing in the Portland 2030 movement and really create a space, and of course with Ruth Institute as a partner, I see the opportunity to really create a space that could ensure that we do have the programs that are designed in such a way to foster the skills for the students and workers for the future of STEM. So we're talking about STEM literacy across all subjects. We're talking about teacher training, right, to teach teachers how to ensure that they're doing this critical thinking skills and the sort of education that has to shift from the rote learning to critical thinking, problem solving from people are entering kindergarten. So they come out of kindergarten going into the elementary with a mindset to be curious and to be confident in your curiosity, right? We're talking about continuing education to continue allow people to feel comfortable that I'm not too old to learn and to be retooled. So if it is that climate change will be affecting, the lobster and the fishing business, right? And so people can't go straight from high school into their family's business. How do you get them retooled to do what? Seaweed farming or whatever it is you have to do differently, which is going to use more science and have more confidence around these issues. We're talking about if you have unions, how does the private sector partner with unions and create a new way of perhaps employee share ownership programs that might include continuing education as part of that process of being able to learn and grow as the industries and the technology shift. And likewise, we're talking about working with your college, your community colleges and your four-year colleges to set up industry workforce development councils to do the kind of continual data collection and management so that there's always that feeding, an ecosystem shift, if you will, towards what I call a smart way of doing business. In my Smart Futures framework, I always say you can solve most problems if you ask 5 questions. 1 is, are you working with creating a sustainable system? Do we see the education private sector nexus as a sustainable ecosystem? 2, meaningful metrics. Are we measuring what really matters? So Austin, you talked about measuring, are we making new companies? Yes, if you're making new companies, but the companies themselves are not using the technology and science to create sustainable industries, right, in terms of the impact on the environment of Maine, then your beautiful tourism environment might be done away with if you're not planning for that as you design that future. Aspirational agency, recognizing that all the players in this ecosystem that is Maine need to see their vision of the future they want as part of it. Resilience. How are you building a resilience of your failure in that a particular sector doesn't do as well as expected? How do you quickly retool and reboot so you can move those people with the base of learning they now have into a new industry that's emerging? And finally, the transformational use of technology. I do believe that the private sector has to see itself really in a new lens, looking at where we are now as a state, as a nation, and as the world, where we need corporations to really become and find the better angels of their nature and step up to the plate and create that compact that allows us to move towards our global vision of a world that works for all. And so I invite Maine and the Maine Chamber of Commerce to really look at the Sustainable Development Goals, build on what Portland has been doing, and perhaps work more closely with the city to create a Maine 2030 vision, sustainable futures vision that includes perhaps the issue of science literacy as one meaningful metric that you might want to measure. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share these few ideas with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. If I can get a spot on that rocket with you in 2030, I'll take it. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ruth Kermish Allen, and the virtual floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Kate. And I'm going to actually start out with a bit of a story as I bring up my slides here. So as I was looking over Sasha's slides, I saw that Luke Sandin is one of his employees. And it just so happens that Luke Sandin was also a student at Deer Isle Stonington High School and a participant of the very first National Science Foundation STEM education grant that I won and was able to bring to the Maine Math and Science Alliance, to bring to Maine. At the time, it was the Island Institute that I was working for, called Communities for Rural Education, Stewardship, and Technology. And that project was all about kids finding the STEM in their local rural communities. And what one of the projects that his group did was they researched a World Sailing Cup, a team that fully came from Deer Isle Stonington, and tried to understand what kinds of STEM, what kinds of engineering, what kinds of real world boat smarts would those boys that all came from that town need to do to compete and win the World Cup. And so Luke's project was he actually built a scaled replica of the old World Cup boat, and kids built websites and did presentations about what STEM meant to the sailing community back in the 1800s in Deer Isle Stonington. And so it is just such a cool opportunity to be here with all of you to see Luke now, who had an high interest in STEM education at that time, which was, geez, I'm going to date myself, probably about 18 years ago now as a high school student, now having a magnificent position, STEM position in one of the leading, most innovative companies here in Maine. So tell Luke that I say hi, Sasha.
I'll pass on the word. Thank you.
Awesome, great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Bear with me for one moment. So thank you so much for the chance to join with all of you. My name is Dr. Ruth Kermish Allen, and I'm the Executive Director for the Maine Mathematics and Science Alliance. To tell you a little bit about the Maine Mathematics and Science Alliance, our mission is to find exciting and inspiring ways to get everyone excited about science, technology, engineering, and math, so that no matter who youth connect with, whether it's an in-school educator, an out-of-school educator, a grandparent, a community professional, that we can have the information that we need to get the youth of today to become the innovators, the problem solvers, and you better bet it, the workforce of tomorrow for Maine as well. There's three core ways in which our Maine-based nonprofit does that. First and foremost, speaking to what Dr. Nelson was speaking about, is professional training for educators. So we provide the training on what is STEM? What are different components of it? What are some great strategies to incorporate the STEM workforce into the curriculum and standards that they already need to be doing in their classwork? And we focus mostly on pre-K through 12. So within Maine, it's been so exciting to see initiatives like the Ruth Institute, the growth of the university systems, the Althon Foundation gifts as well. And our job as a small nonprofit is to think about how do we partner with the workforce industry, emerging STEM areas of innovation, and the education sector to make sure that the students that are in classrooms of educators every single day, think about it. One educator, just one, is going to impact at least 20, if not over 100 students per year. So if you think of your return on investment when you're putting your time and energy into training an educator, giving them additional training for how to really integrate STEM into what they're already doing, the outcome and your return on investment is going to be huge. The second core way that Maine Math and Science Alliance achieves our mission is that we are unique in that we not only are designing programs for educators and with community, we're also doing research and evaluation of those projects to understand what is working about those models, what is not working about those models, and how can we advance knowledge as a field? So not just what's going to work in Maine, but what could Utah, what could Nevada, what could another community do to pick up similar models and do them as well again? And the third component is really building networks and systems, because the thing that we find happening often throughout Maine is there might be one teacher doing something in Caribou and another teacher doing something in Rangeley that are very, very similar, and they've had to both reinvent the wheel. And there's no reason for that to happen in a small state like ours. So every year, Maine Math and Science Alliance, we influence and work directly with approximately 2,300 educators per year. We work not only within Maine, but across 35 states, rural states as well, which if you scale that is approximately 48,000 youth per year. So our teeny organization of about 30 people in Maine really does have the capacity to scale impact across the board within our state and outside of our state as well. So I'm going to just give a quick overview. Most of you probably already know this, but thinking about where we see STEM jobs in the future. So this is the information on the left here is information from Science is Us. That's 58% of Maine jobs are STEM related, 50% of which do not need four-year degrees. The graph on the right is from a study that was done by the Maine Department of Labor back in 2014 that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and I've heard rumors that they're in the process of doing it again now. But if we look at the change of jobs from 2014 to 2024, STEM occupations were looking like they would increase many, many times over, when non-STEM occupations were falling, if remaining a little bit the same. So when we think about how to translate STEM, the greatest, I think, need that is needed between trying to make connections and bridges between the STEM workforce, what their interests are, what their needs are both today and in 10 years from now, and how do we translate that into the education sector? How do we understand standards, education standards? How do we understand how educators connect with their kids? And how do we help educators understand the realities of the kinds of jobs that kids are going to be able to have access to when they graduate or 10 years from now? So our role at Maine Math and Science Alliance is to unpack what is STEM. It doesn't mean the lab coat. It doesn't mean the funny goggles. It means so many different components of what we already see in our community. So speaking again to what Dr. Nelson was speaking about and all of you, a big component of what we do is how do we make STEM relevant and meaningful to our communities? So again, I'll take Darrell Stonington as an example. I can assure you that when you go around town and say, show me a few examples of STEM in your community, you're not going to hear about the diesel mechanics. You're not going to hear about the engineering that has to go into boat building, which is extremely intricate. You're not going to hear about the understanding of the ecosystem and the weather systems and the changing of species and how that's going to be influencing lobstering and acidification of the ocean. But that is inherent. That is inherent in how we think about ourselves as a culture and how the people of Maine identify themselves. We just haven't been calling it STEM to date. So that's part of the work that we're doing at MMSA. And of course, then building the business sector's understanding of what education sector is having to deal with. So we try to build those bridges all the time. And I'm going to share a few examples of existing projects that are happening right now all across the state of Maine, just to give you a little taste of the kinds of things that are possible if we all put our heads together, connecting the business sector with the education sector in ways that are powerful and honestly empowering to educators themselves and the kids that they serve every single day. So there's two core guiding principles that we have found work very, very well through our research to foster STEM innovation. One is to elevate rural voice. Maine is a rural state. Yes, we have Portland. Yes, we have Bangor. Yes, we have Lewiston, Auburn. But even within those communities, there are aspects of ruralness and a sense of community, which means different things in each region of our state. So first is, of course, building those community connections to the learning content. Partnerships with local institutions. I'll be talking about a project in a little bit that we were looking to the Sunday River Ski Resort to think about how does computer science and STEM exist within the work that you do. You would never necessarily link STEM and skiing, but Oh my goodness, there's quite a bit. And of course, co-designing whenever possible. There's nothing worse than the state of Maine than saying, hey, I'm this expert and I've got the answer for you. Here it is. That is not going to work in any community, let alone specifically here in Maine. And so we are really working with educators themselves, with communities, to think about how do we co-design materials together so that there's a very, very loud and elevated rural voice in every single component of the programming that we design. And of course, based on research that we're finding, is kind of iterated on over time. Second is increasing equitable access to STEM education. So thank goodness, Maine Math and Science before COVID hit, we were very quickly moving towards virtual learning opportunities anyway for both our students and our educators, and we just hit full throttle and made that happen very, very quickly. So that addresses two components. One is that it allows folks up in Caribou that hardly ever get the opportunity to come to professional learning opportunities in Bangor, let alone Portland, the opportunity to access that. Same thing for students. If they don't have an engineering course in their high school in Rangeley, maybe they could zoom into one that is happening in Bangor. Learning in community, place-based strategies. How do we make, again, relevant to not necessarily to every single child, no matter whether they see themselves in a STEM career or whether they see themselves in an art career? How do we, as Dr. Nelson is saying, make that STEM literate citizenry? And of course, expand infrastructure. Broadband is going to be pivotal to our success, both business-wise as well as STEM education-wise, which is, I'm sure, no surprise to any of you. So one strategy that we've been using are research to practice partnerships. And that is where you partner with educators and community members and ask them to be researchers with us. So we're gathering data, they're helping us analyze the data and make sense of what it means to them to influence reform in their own schools and districts. So one example of this, and this is a really fun project that we've been working on with funding from the National Science Foundation, Integrate to Innovate. And my colleague, Angela from Educate Maine is here with us as well. They've been a core partner in this project. And essentially, we are working with 3 districts across the state of Maine right now. We're hoping to grow it in time with additional funding that are asking pre-K through 8 educators, what do we need to do to integrate, not have it separate, but integrate computer science learning experiences into existing math and science instruction? Trying to say, let's add a computer science teacher or anything else, asking more of rural educators when there is no capacity, there is no budget for things like that is not going to work. So how do we build from where we currently are and identify opportunities and barriers to help us make that reform happen? And the research from this particular project resulted in 3 things. Now, this is a social network analysis that I'm not going to go into, but the colors represent 3 core outcomes. One is the educators identified that there was no common understanding by educators of what computer science really is. So how do we build that common understanding so that they can explain it to community members and teachers are bought into, oh, now I understand. This is why this is important to teach to our kids, not just language arts and not just English. The second component was around, there was a lack of examples of how you might actually integrate computer science with math and science. And third, it was not a priority by administration because it was not necessarily assessed. And so how do we have data to show why computer science is important that will influence assessment grades in the long term? So that's been a really interesting project in one example. And this project, through Angela's help, has pulled in many, many different businesses because on the Research to Practice partnership, we have educators, we have school administrators, and we have local businesses. So everyone from Jackson Labs to Baker Industries to Sunday River, and that's only to name a few, have all been showing how within these communities, this is how computer science plays into what we do in our everyday work. Community partnerships is another big component of work. One example is a partnership that we've had with Texas Instruments called Engineering Ambassadors, where you can see the problem is educators are saying, we know engineering is scary, what the heck even is it? But we know that we're having to teach it in some ways. And Texas Instruments says, well, our local community doesn't understand what we do as a business. How do we convince them to work here? And so we designed this project called Engineering Ambassadors Together that partners educators with engineers of local businesses to design curriculum together for kids to understand engineering design problems. Oh, I'm just gonna stop this. I will send these slides to you so you can see the videos if you guys would like. Oh, okay. Another example of community partnerships is really fun and funded by the National Science Foundation called STEM Ports. This is happening throughout Maine, and it is asking youth to build augmented reality games that tell the past, present, and future of natural resource-based economies in Maine. So for example, when we're thinking about forestry, when we're thinking about agriculture, when we're thinking about energy, what has been the past? How do we tell that story? What is happening in that industry right now? Is it depressed? Is it going through a rejuvenation? And what would we as a student want to see that STEM economy look like in our own community 10, 15, 20 years from now, all told through the story of augmented reality. So I think my time is about up. I have already kind of spoken a little bit about virtual learning. This is our ACRES project that works fully virtually with after-school educators all across the country, has them meet in small groups. We coach them through incorporating better STEM skills and training into their after-school programming. So 4-H, Boys and Girls Clubs, you name it, because STEM is accessible at many different places where kids are learning. And we found through research that we've had success, as you can see here, before an educator took our cohort training, and after, they have increased their ability to convert lessons into virtual lessons, which we all did during COVID. They're offering a variety of STEM lessons more than they did before, and they also know how to run virtual field trips better than they have in the past. So those are just a teeny tiny sample of amazing projects that just one organization is helping make happen across Maine, when there's many organizations that are working on similar outcomes. And we have a lot of power in Maine to really make a vision for a STEM workforce happen that is very, very exciting, entrepreneurial, and is within reach in a small state like ours, and the partnerships that we can have happen.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I love seeing these partnerships with private sector and nonprofit organizations with educators. So we're going to move into the question segment of the webinar. And I think the best way to do this is I'm going to ask a question and not put anyone on the spot, but we'll try to work through each of you that want to address the question before we move on to the next one. So I'm going to do the first question, and then somebody can just jump in first, and we'll give everyone on the panel an opportunity to answer. So several of you have mentioned flexibility and retraining. What structures does Maine need to grow in order to help workers adjust for the next STEM job? And if one of you doesn't take a stab at it, then I'll call on you. All right, Austin, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. You're asking about structures?
Yeah, what structures does Maine need to grow? What resources do we need to have available in order to help workers make those adjustments in the workforce? So maybe a worker that's already in the workforce that is looking to take that next step, or as we see, things grow and change, especially as we have in the pandemic, where we've got a lot of folks looking for jobs, and we've got a lot of companies who need people to work, but there's that divide. How do we get people from one place of needing to fill that need for employers?
Sure. I think, maybe personal experience and perspective is you need to take a variety of approaches. There's probably not a silver bullet. I think one program that has always worked well from a state level has been, I think of Massachusetts, they had a workforce training fund, and that enabled, I believe, an employer to access up to $250,000 in grant funding to apply towards workers who needed to be reskilled in a particular field. And so something like that is a tremendous program that really aligned the area of interest, the need for reskilling, the opportunity for economic mobility by way of reskilling with a programmatic solution. So I think kind of inherent funding structures, credits, reimbursements, anything that would incent, I think the pursuit of that reskilling would be tremendous. I think just exposure is great. The ability to create more cross-pollination, I used this word earlier, but cross-pollination between industries that might have historically not incorporated as much technology or some of these newer technologies, and saying, what would it look like to convene a more traditional based outfit company set of employees alongside a group, a consortium, another set of companies that are thinking about these new technologies, and share what they're doing, share their company, share their vision, share their technologies, and see if that just creates I think, to me, it's a sense of possibility. You don't really know. You hear STEM, you hear everyone should learn to code, you hear these are important, but you don't really know what that means. You don't really know what's possible if you do have those skills. So a lot of it, I think, comes into having role models, having visibility into, if I go and get these skills, if I take the time out of my, if it's an existing worker, conceivably very busy life, to go and reskill, what's going to be at the end of the tunnel? So I think there's a lot that's going to be predicated on the ability to show that the juice is worth the squeeze by way of examples, by way of networking, and by way of programming.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have anything else they want to add to that? Any other thoughts there? If people do have questions, I forgot to mention, please type them in the chat. I'm happy to offer those questions up or feedback. Dr. Nelson?
I just want to add something about probably the psychological space that many people are in right now. I think that the uncertainty of the COVID pandemic will take some time for people to get over. And so for the people who are naturally, I would say, risk takers, if you have a fund that they know they can get, they'll actually go out and look for it, right? And they will try and make things work for them. But we also have to find a way, as you say, structures. I'm thinking about structures. There might be some of the social spaces which are not the standard ones, or maybe the community colleges can work with some of these other social spaces where people gather, right? We're not even gathering anymore. So where people at least have touch points with their families, or they still go to the store or whatever, to sort of offer this first entry, that first listening, that allows people to first unpack some of the fear that they're facing, so that they can take in the information that, hey, you can be retrained. And that may be, I think, a gap. So maybe since people are no longer, quote unquote, filing for unemployment, but they're looking for a check to come, a card in this case, to come in the mail. But some people who are still looking for jobs, maybe on that same unemployment place that they're looking for jobs, there could be an offering by the state to, I would say, some kind of, I don't know how to phrase it so people feel comfortable, because people sometimes also don't want to be seen as weak. So to be very cleverly done, if you kind of hide it, cleverly done, that allows people to feel comfortable in saying, I really am afraid of technology, right? So, and it could be an irrational fear. I have an irrational fear personally about forms. So people say, how come you're not a registered ATA certified company? When I look on those forms, I totally panic. So, and my friends don't understand it. Well, people are just irrational, right? I would prefer to research nanocube satellites, which I know nothing about, and spend hours doing that, than looking at a form on a government platform. So I'm saying there has to be also not just structure, but also processes. And perhaps we can use maybe storytelling, make more short films available, personal story making available. So people, as you say, the role models that are out there, those who have done it, can say, hey, come. And I think because Maine is has so many people in the lobster industry and the fishing industry, they really kind of know what it is like to work as a team and to like be close-knit. So maybe we have to design something that kind of fits into that culture for those people who do have to be reskilled to work in other jobs.
Great, thank you so much. I have a little bit of fear of technology sometimes myself. It's why I have teenagers. They're very helpful. So I'm gonna move, unless someone else has something to add, I'm gonna move on to the next question. Benjamin, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a question? you can unmute yourself if you wanted to. Can you? You can't unmute yourself. Let's see. I'm not in control of your mute button. So, oh, there you go. All right.
I am. Hi.
Hi.
I did want to just jump in on, there's a lot of great things that were said. I wanted to try and tie together what Dr. Nelson and Dr. Kermish Allen and Austin said. I think about the infrastructure and the institutions. There are a lot of resources available, but it's sort of like it's there, but it's either small or it's not coherent or readily apparent from those who don't already dwell in these structures. And so, coherence and then, cogency to this particular set of interests and outcomes, I think could be augmented with financial and technical and other resources. And there's a role for government and industry there. I think Austin made a really good point about the going through employers. All these macroeconomic theories about Pareto improvements lead to all these trickle down things and upskilling workers. Like, that's great. But I think the reality for a lot of small businesses in Maine is that it's just too big of an ask to be spending significant resources on training staff or renewing equipment or doing these sorts of things that are going to increase their competitiveness and be able to help them survive and thrive. And also, there's a lot of dependency, particularly in the rural areas, on legacy extractive industries. And there's a whole bunch of structural challenges there, apart from whatever the predilections of management and constraints of knowledge and technology might be in a given enterprise. So all these interlocking challenges, but I think that going to a place that already has, a fertile substrate like an institution, a school, an employer, that's where maybe we can get some more traction. And I think that like what MMSA does, and the referencing my own experience there is the Marine Pathways programs in the schools. There's these things, these threads that are there that we can start to weave together. And I think segmenting is perhaps a useful lens for looking at it, because it's like, who are you targeting? Are you trying to cultivate a pipeline, of teenagers, high school students who are going to be the workforce, getting them to that place where cultivating them year over year is going to, give them an entree into opportunities and for them to be attractive potential hires for incoming or extant businesses? Or is it, retraining older workers? There's all these different kind of angles of attack, and we can't do everything, of course. But I do think that Dr. Nelson made a particularly interesting point about the integration. And I think about it not just through demographics and other metrics, but through rural and urban. I think there's a real risk of resource concentration being lopsided because of the dynamism of Southern Maine, the Portland area, and then all the businesses. Everybody wants to move there from the Eastern Corridor, and folks up in Jonesport and Shed and all these other places, right? Like, there's just a dearth of opportunities, and the geography is a real constraint. And so I think it's very important to make sure that this network of institutions and other stakeholders are really taking that into account, because not only does it have sort of immediate implications for what business opportunities are there and how the state is perceived by potential corporations, but there are long-term community and socioeconomic and societal considerations that, if handled improperly, can be quite damaging, but if handled well, can be really a source of growth.
I want to jump in and give an opportunity to ask a couple more.
I'm done now. It's a long talk, sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. I just want to give our panelists an opportunity to answer a couple of questions. I think this will be the last question. And I think a really important one is how industries in your sector or in general can work better with four-year colleges, community colleges, trade or vocational programs to fill these STEM job demands of the future. So I think an opportunity to weigh in for each of you on that, if it makes sense, and then we'll wrap up.
If I can speak, I don't know if you can hear me okay?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We've been really fortunate, and maybe this is not, it's an example of what's working right, maybe not an example of how to do it differently, but we've been very fortunate that as even being a very small company, we've had now 4 interns work for us. Thanks to grants from the Maine Space Grant Consortium that are actively trying to support STEM jobs, and specifically STEM jobs, especially within space and aerospace sciences. So that's been great for us. I often mentally harken back to when I was a kid growing up in Orland and Bucksport and then later Orono, what would have gotten me engaged? And I think that's where I personally struggle, is like, what are the points of engagement where if you're interested in the sciences, if you're not lucky enough to have a good teacher or parents that want to foster that with you, how do you get engaged in that level? I would really, at least for our sector, the aerospace industry, I would really love to see it that we are seeing interest in not only payloads from Southern Maine high schools. Like we just had the Falmouth High School put in their payload. I would love to see I see Judy from X in the Boxes here on the call. Love to see little payloads from at least 1 or 2 schools in every county of Maine flying space, whether it's our rocket or the International Space Station. More examples of that, and actively, sending out kits, little projects that kids could work on to inspire them to get their hands on it, no matter their economic circumstances. But they're in the school, they can get their hands on it and maybe launch it here in Maine or elsewhere. So I think a lot of the focus is think about those rural students. Think about how they don't have access to certain things. I know I certainly didn't as a kid. What would they need to get in their hands, most likely in the school, so they could get hands-on experience and playing with what triggers their curiosity in the sciences. And then last but not least, I think that one big struggle is we have interns from as far away as an hour's drive to get here. But somebody who's up in Limestone, Maine, where we were just for a number of weeks, I don't know. How do we? I'm asking the question back. How does the private industry support that? I don't know. That's a toughie. There were so many people supportive of what we do, and so many kids attending that event, and I really want to get them engaged. I don't know how. So
I think I'd like to jump in here, because the issue I'm thinking about from a developing country perspective, which is really my area of expertise, working in developing countries. But to the extent that a rural Maine person is excluded in the same way that a poor person in rural Africa, to the extent that they do have the bandwidth, which at least Africans don't have, this idea about, first of all, if you're now able to have the teachers teaching virtually the material, then the question is, how do we able to provide them online virtual volunteer placements or online virtual internships? And I have to say, honestly, one of the challenges that I've been toying with this concept of a living wage is that for small companies that really philosophically want to do something, the minute the wage becomes a certain requirement, then it kind of forces them not to do it, because unless there's some rule that says, okay, if the person is an intern in high school or something, you can pay them this amount, then they just won't be able to afford it because they're barely eking by. So even though personally and philosophically, I'm speaking for myself as a small consulting firm that wants to take on more kids, I just don't have the budget to do it. So I just outsource it to Africa or India or somewhere, because I can get that person to do it for $4 an hour. So we have to really be mindful that when we're making policies and when we're trying to create this opportunity to, like, say, as you said, Benjamin, I don't believe in this rising tide lifts all boats theory, unless you really, throw out the anchor, right? We have to throw out the anchor to these people who are way up in Maine, who really, I think, should be allowed to enjoy the beauty of living that bucolic lifestyle. Not everybody should be forced to have to move to this crowded cities to have a good life. And so now that we have technology that enables us to keep people where they are, our policy design And this is why it's important that the Chamber of Commerce then has to have a conversation with the state and the government to say, hey, Maine 2030, what does it look like? So that structuring of maybe a new regulation, a new policy that says, okay, if a small business that is earning under this or employs under 5 people wants to take on an intern, or they can get a tax break, or they can get back what they paid to that intern, can get it back in tax at the end of the year. There has to be some way, you know, of making it part of the policy of the state, not just the Portland area, to ensure that the rural places are not left behind.
Yeah, I agree full-heartedly. And I certainly think, you know, the question was about what can community colleges, higher ed do, but I think, you know, we naturally have begun talking about the K-12, the public school and the after school sector, because if we don't have kids that are experiencing this in elementary, middle, and high school and getting that kind of like lighting that spark of ideas and innovation and interest and desire in STEM education, there is not going to be anyone that's coming from Maine to fill those positions, to fill those programs when they get to that level of education. And so I just really am always beating the drum. And those of you that have heard me talk before, I'm always beating that drum. Don't forget about K-12. There has to be some kind of conversation and continuum about how do we think about all those different components of education, not just the one that's closest to when they're going to start working. So it's just, I think, something that I wanted to highlight. And what we were talking about before, as far as rural communities, they are very much so thinking about what are some innovative things that they can be doing, what is naturally part of who they are, and coming to it from that conversation about what kinds of special STEM opportunities do you have? What do you think is STEM in your own community is something really important, rather than saying it's only something you can do in Portland. So I really agree with what both Sasha and Claire were saying, for sure. And I just want to make one final point in that Maine, we're at a very pivotal point right now, being that we have a STEM workforce gap that's significant. We are at a point where we are investing in very exciting STEM ideas, technology, businesses, you name it. But at the same time, there's a significant teacher shortage that is about to hit very, very hard. The teacher shortage in Maine in rural communities prior to COVID was getting bad. As we can see now from early retirements, it's getting excessively bad. And so it's almost like a perfect storm, that if we don't start thinking about this problem for addressing the STEM workforce needs as a holistic multi-system, we're going to end up forgetting about one component of it or the other and not seeing it as a whole. So just thinking about that as a whole system is something that I would strongly advocate for.
Thank you so much. And it's sort of hard to believe that we're almost an hour and a half into this. So I am going to turn it back over to Ben. But thank you so much to the panelists. This has been an amazing discussion, and hopefully we can continue to have more discussions like this. So Ben, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you to all our panelists. This was a fantastic discussion, the presentations, and I think, you know, for the state of Maine to have this conversation here, you know, I think we see the future is bright, so to speak, with the discussion we heard. So thanks for all your presentations. With that, bringing us to the conclusion, this was our 4th in a series of 4 webinars on STEM and the future of STEM jobs here in Maine. Want to thank our partnership with Science is Us. They've been fantastic, and we were so happy. They're a national organization that they wanted to look at Maine and drill down and see some of the issues here in Maine. So thank you so much. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors that make programs such as this possible: Bangor Savings Bank, Central Maine Power, Mimic, Rudman and Winchell, Eaton Peabody, Delta Dental, and Amera Health Caritas. So thank you to our sponsors. Thanks for all participating today. This is recorded and it is available on our website. So if you think there's anyone that would enjoy seeing this, don't hesitate to point them towards mainchamber.org, and the program will be available to be watched there. So thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll hopefully see you soon.